In the quiet, snow-draped town of Pine Ridge, nestled deep within the majestic Colorado Rockies, fate had intricately woven a mystery that no mortal could have possibly foreseen. Dr. Eleanor Vance, a woman no stranger to the weariness of long nights and the hurried departures from the town's bustling hospital, found herself abruptly halted one frigid evening by an utterly peculiar sight. A solitary bobcat kitten, its delicate fur shimmering with a delicate layer of frost, sat utterly still just outside the hospital's grand entrance. Its piercing golden eyes, ancient and knowing, seemed to hold a profound question, a silent plea that resonated deep within Eleanor's soul. At first, it was merely an oddity, a fleeting moment of curious observation that brushed against the edges of her awareness. But as the days turned into nights, the resilient kitten returned with unwavering determination, its silent vigil unbroken. Eleanor found herself unable to dismiss the nagging feeling that this was no mere coincidence, no random act of a lost creature. What unseen force kept it tethered to this place? What silent yearning fueled its steadfast refusal to leave? As the icy nights deepened and the enigma surrounding the bobcat intensified, Eleanor felt an invisible thread drawing her into a realm far beyond the cold, hard logic of her medical training. A profound connection began to bloom, blurring the delicate lines between the world of man and the untamed spirit of nature, between the sterile realm of science and the mystical embrace of fate. Was this simply an abandoned creature desperately in need of help? Or was it the nascent spark of something far greater, something that would forever alter her understanding of life and loss? Before we delve deeper into this captivating tale, we implore you to ignite that like button and ensure you've subscribed to our channel for more enthralling stories. Don't forget to ring that notification bell so you won't miss a single breathtaking narrative. The first ethereal flakes of winter snow had begun their gentle descent upon Pine Ridge, a quaint town, cradled in the protective embrace of the Colorado Rockies foothills. Dr. Eleanor Vance, her weary shoulders slumped after an emotionally and physically draining 14-hour shift within the chaotic realm of the trauma unit at Town Hospital, pulled her thick coat tighter against the biting chill. The harsh glare of the parking lot lights cast elongated dancing shadows across the freshly snow-dusted pavement, and her every breath materialized in the frigid air like fleeting translucent clouds. As she trudged towards her Apex Art vehicle, a subtle movement near the hospital's imposing entrance snagged her attention. Huddled against the cold, unforgiving stone wall was a diminutive creature adorned with distinctive tufted ears and striking facial markings. Unmistakably, a bobcat kitten. Its luminous amber eyes, pools of ancient wisdom in the dim light, seemed inexplicably fixed upon the hospital's towering doors with an almost unnerving, human-like intensity. Eleanor hesitated, her gloved hand hovering over her car door handle. Wild animals were not an uncommon sight in the rugged outskirts of Pine Ridge, yet they rarely dared to venture this close to the heart of town, especially to sit so vulnerably exposed outside the relentless activity of a busy hospital. Something profound in the kitten's unwavering gaze, a silent plea that tugged at the deepest fibers of her empathy, stirred a nascent curiosity within her. "Ah, hey there, little one," she murmured softly, maintaining a respectful distance, her voice a gentle whisper in the stillness of the night. The bobcat kitten blinked slowly, its gaze never wavering from the hospital entrance, but it did not retreat. Instead, it seemed to study her with those penetrating eyes, as if assessing her intentions before returning its unwavering attention to the silent doors. Eleanor couldn't help but notice the kitten's fragile frame, the way it shivered almost imperceptibly in the relentless, bitter cold. Against her better judgment, a wave of compassion washing over her, she retrieved a protein bar from the depths of her pocket, its wrapper crinkling in the silence. She carefully unwrapped half of it, and placed it on the ground several feet away from the vulnerable animal before slowly backing away. To her profound surprise, the kitten approached with hesitant steps, its tiny nose twitching as it cautiously sniffed the offering. Then, with delicate precision, it consumed the small morsel. "You're hungry, huh?" Eleanor whispered, her voice laced with a mixture of concern and fascination. "Where's your mother?" The kitten finished its meager meal, and then, to Eleanor's utter astonishment, returned to its original position by the cold stone wall, its unwavering eyes once again trained on the silent hospital doors. Eleanor glanced at her watch. It was nearing the witching hour, and the temperature was plummeting with alarming speed. She knew with the cold, hard logic of her profession that she should contact animal control. Yet something about the kitten's deliberate posture, its almost purposeful vigil, gave her significant pause. It didn't appear lost or distressed. It exuded an aura of patient waiting. "I'll check on you tomorrow," she promised the small creature, her voice barely audible above the whispering wind, as she finally turned and headed towards her car. She cast one last lingering glance back at the solitary figure, a tiny silhouette of unwavering devotion against the stark backdrop of the hospital, keeping its lonely, silent vigil. The following evening, Eleanor concluded her demanding shift earlier than usual and deliberately chose the same exit, her heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. To her profound surprise, the bobcat kitten was there once more, perched in almost the exact same spot as the night before, its amber eyes still fixed on the hospital, with that same haunting, expectant gaze. This time Eleanor had come prepared, her heart heavy with a strange premonition. She carefully set down a small container of fresh water and a portion of high-quality cat food she had thoughtfully purchased during her brief lunch break, placing them at a safe and respectful distance from the enigmatic kitten. Once again, the small animal approached with cautious trepidation, its delicate paws patting softly on the cold pavement. It drank thirstily, lapping at the water with rapid, delicate movements, and then consumed the offered food with an almost desperate hunger before silently resuming its unwavering position. For 5 consecutive nights, this poignant pattern repeated itself, a silent ritual unfolding under the cloak of darkness. The kitten appeared as the last vestiges of daylight, surrendered to the encroaching night, remained steadfast throughout the long, silent hours, and vanished without a trace by the time the first rays of dawn painted the eastern sky. Its mysterious presence became a deeply personal enigma for Eleanor, a silent question mark that lingered in the quiet moments of her demanding shifts, a puzzle that tugged at the edges of her rational mind. On the 6th night, as a particularly ferocious snowstorm unleashed its icy fury upon Pine Ridge, Eleanor arrived at the hospital entrance, carrying a small insulated shelter she had painstakingly constructed from a sturdy storage container, its interior lined with thick thermal blankets. The bobcat kitten was already there, a small, forlorn figure huddled against the swirling snow, its fur dusted white looking particularly vulnerable against the worsening elements. "You can't stay out in this," Eleanor murmured to the shivering creature as she carefully placed the makeshift shelter near the wall. "I don't know why you're here, little one, but I can't bear the thought of you freezing." To her immense relief, after she had retreated to a respectful distance, the kitten cautiously approached the strange object, its nose twitching inquisitively. It tentatively explored the interior, before finally curling up within the unexpected warmth and protection. Though its luminous eyes remained watchful, their unwavering gaze still fixed on those silent hospital doors. As Eleanor turned to leave her mind, preoccupied by the small creature and its inexplicable vigil, she nearly collided with Sarah Jenkins, a seasoned night shift nurse she had worked alongside for countless years. "Sorry," Eleanor apologized, her brow furrowed with concern as she glanced back at the small shelter. I was distracted. Sarah followed her gaze, her own eyes widening in disbelief. "Is that a bobcat?" she asked incredulously, her voice a hushed whisper. Eleanor nodded, a weary sigh escaping her lips. "A kitten. It's been sleeping here every night for almost a week. That's unusual." Sarah said, her brow furrowing in thoughtful contemplation. Wild animals don't typically behave like that without a compelling reason. "My thoughts exactly." Eleanor agreed, her voice laced with a mixture of bewilderment and growing concern. "There's something almost purposeful, almost deliberate about the way it watches the hospital. I can't quite explain it, but I have this profound feeling that it's waiting for someone." Sarah's typically pragmatic expression softened, a hint of warmth entering her kind eyes. "You always were a softie for strays, Eleanor," she said gently, her tone devoid of judgment. "Remember that three-legged coyote you painstakingly rehabilitated last year?" Eleanor offered a faint smile, the memory a small beacon of light in the darkness. "This feels different, Sarah. There's a story here, I can sense it deep within me." Sarah studied her friend's earnest face for a long moment, then sighed, a hint of caution in her voice. "Well, whatever it is, be careful, Eleanor. Even a bobcat kitten can be dangerous if it feels threatened or cornered." "I know," Eleanor assured her, her gaze returning to the small shelter where two luminous amber eyes glinted in the darkness, still steadfastly focused on the building where hundreds of human stories unfolded each day. Stories of hope and despair, of life and inevitable loss. "I'm keeping my distance, but I simply can't bring myself to ignore it." As they parted ways, Eleanor cast one final lingering glance at the small shelter, a silent promise hanging in the frigid air. Over the next 2 weeks, the bobcat kitten's unwavering presence became a point of quiet fascination, a shared secret whispered among the night shift staff. Eleanor had begun to call him Shadow, a name that seemed to capture the mysterious nature of his nightly appearances and his silent, watchful demeanor, though she couldn't quite articulate why the name resonated so deeply within her. Every evening, as dusk painted the sky in hues of twilight, Shadow would be there, waiting stoically, sometimes venturing a few tentative feet from his makeshift shelter, but always returning to his post, his unwavering eyes fixed on the hospital entrance. Eleanor had adjusted her routine deliberately, arriving early for her demanding shifts, just to steal a few precious moments, observing Shadow, a silent communion passing between them. One evening, as she approached with Shadow's now customary meal of fresh water and premium kitten food, she noticed an elderly woman kneeling near the shelter, her voice a gentle murmur as she spoke softly to the small creature. "Excuse me, ma'am." Eleanor called gently, not wanting to startle either Shadow or the frail woman. "I should probably warn you that's a wild animal." The woman turned, revealing a weathered face etched with the deep lines of both sorrow and an unexpected gentle kindness. "I know what he is, dear," she said, her voice raspy, yet surprisingly warm. "He's Leo's little Shadow." Eleanor felt a sudden jolt of recognition, a strange stirring within her at the unfamiliar name. "Leo," she repeated cautiously, approaching with slow, deliberate steps. The woman nodded, rising slowly to her feet, her movements stiff and labored. "Leo Maxwell, my neighbor. He passed away here at Town Hospital about a month ago." Suddenly, the scattered pieces of the puzzle began to click into place within Eleanor's mind. The unwavering vigil, the profound sadness in Shadow's eyes, and the bobcat. Shadow. Eleanor ventured the name, now imbued with a deeper, more poignant meaning. The woman offered a sad, knowing smile. Leo found him as a tiny thing last spring, barely clinging to life, after a terrible storm ravaged a den of bobcats up near Blackwood Creek. Leo always had a way with wild things, a deep connection to the natural world. He raised this little bobcat. He raised a bobcat kitten. Eleanor asked, her voice filled with a mixture of disbelief and dawning understanding as she carefully set down the container of food. The woman, who introduced herself as Martha Holloway, nodded slowly. Leo lived alone since his beloved wife passed away 10 years ago. He was a renowned wildlife biologist before he retired. That little bobcat, Shadow, he gave Leo a renewed sense of purpose in his final months, though none of us knew then just how little time he had left. What happened to him? Eleanor asked, though a heavy sinking feeling in the pit of her stomach suggested she already knew the answer. Cancer, Martha said simply, her voice flat with the weight of grief. Pancreatic. By the time they finally diagnosed it, it had spread everywhere. He didn't want any aggressive treatment, said it would only prolong the inevitable suffering. So he spent his last days at home, surrounded by the peace of nature he loved so dearly, until the pain became too unbearable. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears as she continued. They brought him here at the very end. He was terribly worried about Shadow, made me promise to check on him. But when I went to Leo's cabin after the funeral, Shadow was already gone. Eleanor looked at the bobcat kitten, who was now cautiously approaching the offered food, his small body radiating an aura of profound loss. And now he's here, waiting. Animals know things we can't even begin to comprehend. Martha said softly, her gaze filled with a deep, ancient wisdom. Leo always used to say that. I believe Shadow is waiting for the only human he ever truly bonded with. A lump formed in Eleanor's throat, a wave of unexpected emotion washing over her. Has Shadow been here every night since Leo passed away? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Martha shrugged her shoulders, slumping slightly. I couldn't say for certain. I only spotted him by chance today when I came to visit my sister in the rehab wing. But it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. Leo and that kitten were inseparable. He even had a little harness for him used to take him on quiet walks in the woods. That's unusual, Eleanor said carefully, her mind racing to reconcile the image of a respected wildlife biologist raising a wild bobcat kitten. Leo was unusual, Martha replied with a sad, gentle smile. But he knew what he was doing. He never tried to turn Shadow into a domestic pet. He always said he was carefully preparing him to eventually return to the wild once he was old enough and self-sufficient. He never expected to leave before that crucial task was completed. As they spoke, Shadow finished his meal and silently returned to his makeshift shelter, those luminous amber eyes once again fixed with unwavering devotion on the silent hospital doors. Was Leo a patient of mine? Eleanor asked, her brow furrowed in concentration, as she tried to recall the faces and names that passed through the chaotic realm of the trauma unit. Sometimes in the relentless tide of emergencies, names and faces blurred together. Martha shook her head gently. No, dear. He was under the care of Dr. Ramirez in oncology. A quiet, unassuming man. Didn't want to trouble anyone. But he loved that little kitten fiercely. Eleanor nodded slowly, a deep ache of sympathy resonating within her for the kind man she had never met, and the small, wild creature still faithfully awaiting a reunion that could never be. I should probably get going, Martha said, glancing at her watch with a sigh. Visiting hours will be over soon. But I'm glad Shadow has someone like you looking out for him. As the elderly woman walked slowly away, her figure disappearing into the gathering twilight, Eleanor crouched down at a respectful distance from the shelter. So, that's it, huh, Shadow? She murmured softly into the stillness of the night. You're waiting for Leo. The bobcat kitten blinked slowly, and for a fleeting, poignant moment, Eleanor could have sworn she saw a flicker of profound understanding in those intelligent, ancient eyes. That night, during her brief break, Eleanor found herself inexplicably drawn to the hospital's electronic patient records. She usually respected patient privacy with unwavering diligence, but something about Shadow's unwavering vigil, the depth of his apparent grief, compelled her to learn more about the man he mourned. Leo Maxwell, age 72, had been admitted with severe, unrelenting pain 3 weeks prior, just as Martha had described. He had been under the compassionate care of Dr. Ramirez in the oncology department, suffering from end-stage pancreatic cancer. The detailed notes indicated that he had remained remarkably lucid and calm until the very end, resolutely refusing any aggressive, life-prolonging measures, requesting only palliative care to manage his pain. He had passed away peacefully at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. Eleanor scrolled further through the digital file, her heart catching in her chest, as she discovered a poignant notation from one of the night nurses. Apparently, on his final night, Leo had made a repeated heartfelt request to be moved to a room with a window facing the front of the hospital. The request had been granted, though the specific reason for his unusual desire hadn't been formally recorded. Eleanor leaned back in her chair, a profound wave of emotion washing over her. Had Leo known somehow that Shadow would come looking for him? Had he wanted to be where the bobcat kitten might see him, might sense his fading presence one last time? You okay, Doc? Sarah's familiar voice broke through her reverie. She placed a steaming mug of coffee on the desk beside Eleanor. You look like you've seen a ghost. Eleanor gestured to the glowing screen, her voice thick with emotion. Remember that bobcat kitten Shadow? I think I finally understand why he's here. Sarah listened intently as Eleanor recounted her conversation with Martha and the heartbreaking details she had gleaned from Leo's patient records. When Eleanor finished speaking, a long, thoughtful silence filled the small break room. That's quite a story, Sarah said finally, her voice soft with empathy. I know it sounds almost unbelievable. Eleanor admitted, her gaze distant. But you haven't seen the way this kitten watches the hospital. It's not random, Sarah. He's looking for Leo. He's grieving. Even if that's true, Sarah said gently, her brow furrowed with concern. What can we possibly do? The man is gone, Eleanor. Eleanor ran a weary hand through her hair, her mind grappling with the enormity of the situation. I don't know. But I can't just ignore this, Sarah. This little bobcat kitten is literally keeping a vigil for someone he loved. Doesn't that mean something profound? Sarah studied her friend's earnest face for a long moment, her expression softening with understanding. You're really invested in this, aren't you? I don't know why. Eleanor admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Maybe because after 15 years in trauma, I've witnessed so much loss, so much that can't be undone, so much that feels utterly senseless. But this helping Shadow in some small way feels like something tangible I can actually do, right? Sarah's expression softened further, a genuine warmth radiating from her eyes. What does Shadow need, do you think? Eleanor pondered the question, her gaze drifting towards the window where the first stars were beginning to prick the darkening sky. Closure, perhaps. Some kind of transition. Leo was preparing him for the wild, according to his neighbor. Maybe Shadow needs help completing that journey. Then that's what you should do, Sarah said simply, her voice filled with quiet conviction. Help Shadow finish what Leo started. As Eleanor's brief respite drew to a close, and she returned to the demanding rhythm of her rounds, the seed of an idea began to take root in her mind, a way to honor both a kind man she had never met and the remarkable, unlikely bond he had forged with a wild creature. The next morning, instead of driving straight home, her body aching with exhaustion, Eleanor found herself turning onto a winding country road, guided by the address listed in Leo Maxwell's patient file. The small cabin sat nestled at the end of a long tree-lined driveway, embraced by towering pines and offering a breathtaking vista of the distant snow-capped mountains. It exuded an aura of quiet solitude, though a subtle air of neglect hinted at its recent abandonment. A small, hand-painted sign at the edge of the overgrown property caught her eye. For sale by estate. Leo had no immediate family, it seemed. Eleanor sat in her parked car, the engine idling softly, a sense of unease washing over her. She had acted on pure impulse, driven by a compelling need to understand Shadow's story. But now she felt a pang of guilt at the thought of trespassing on a deceased man's property. As she debated her next move, her gaze drifted towards the tree line. A graceful deer and her delicate fawn grazed peacefully near what appeared to be a small, untended garden, their breath misting in the cold air. Taking it as a sign, a gentle nudge from the universe, Eleanor turned off the ignition and approached the cabin cautiously. The front door was securely locked, but her persistent search yielded a tarnished brass key tucked beneath a decorative stone by the porch steps. A common hiding place in the close-knit rural community. "Hello," she called out softly as she stepped inside, the sound of her own voice echoing in the silent stillness of the empty cabin, though she knew no one would answer. The interior was simple, but undeniably comfortable, filled with the quiet echoes of a life lived in harmony with nature. A cozy living room boasted well-worn, overstuffed furniture bookshelves overflowing with volumes on wildlife and the natural world, and numerous framed photographs adorning the walls, many featuring Leo himself in various wilderness settings, his face etched with a deep love for the wild. On the dusty kitchen counter, Eleanor noticed a small stack of unopened mail and a worn leather-bound notebook. Feeling like an intruder, yet driven by her growing investment in Shadow's poignant story, she hesitantly picked up the journal and carefully flipped through its aged pages. It appeared to be a detailed chronicle of Leo's time with Shadow. The initial entries were precise and scientific, meticulously recording the kitten's weight-eating habits and developmental milestones. But as the pages turned, the tone shifted, becoming more personal, more deeply reflective. Shadow explored the entire clearing today. One entry read, the ink slightly faded. His confidence grows daily. Found him attempting to pounce on a particularly bold squirrel. Hunting instincts emerging right on schedule. He still returns to me when called, though I've been using the whistle more than my voice preparing him for when I'm gone. Another entry dated just weeks before Leo's hospitalization sent a shiver down Eleanor's spine. Pain worse today. Had to sit while watching Shadow practice climbing the old oak. He's nearly ready for independence, but I worry I won't be here to complete his transition. Martha says she'll check on him, but it's not the same. He needs gradual preparation for full wild living. Have written to the local wildlife rehabilitation center, but no response yet. Time is running short. For both of us, it seems. Eleanor felt tears pricking at her eyes, the raw vulnerability of Leo's words resonating deeply within her. The final entry, scrawled in a shaky hand, was almost unbearable to read. Barely able to write today. Martha taking me to the hospital tomorrow. Shadow. He senses something is wrong. Stayed by my bed all night, purring softly. The hardest part of dying is leaving him before his journey is complete. He deserves his wildlife. I desperately hope someone will help him find his way. Setting down the journal, her hands trembling, Eleanor wiped her eyes and looked around the cabin with a newfound sense of purpose. In a small room off the kitchen, she discovered what was clearly Shadow's space. A cozy bedding area made of soft blankets, several sturdy natural climbing structures crafted from branches, and various intriguing items that seemed specifically designed for training a young bobcat for survival in the wild. On a small, cluttered desk in the corner, Eleanor found a neatly labeled folder, Shadow's Release Plan. Inside, she discovered a meticulously detailed month-by-month strategy for transitioning the bobcat kitten to complete independence, along with a hand-drawn map marking an ideal release site on protected land, approximately 20 miles from the cabin. Also within the folder were brochures and copies of correspondence with various wildlife rehabilitation centers, including a letter Leo had apparently never mailed to the Colorado Wildlife Rehabilitation Association, earnestly requesting their assistance with Shadow's eventual release. Eleanor sank heavily into the worn desk chair, overwhelmed by the tangible evidence of Leo's profound care and meticulous planning for Shadow's future plans, tragically interrupted by his sudden illness and death. No wonder the bobcat kitten had sought out the hospital. It was the last place he had sensed Leo's presence, the last vestige of the only love and security he had ever known. And now he was waiting his innocent heart, unable to comprehend the finality of his human friend's absence. With renewed determination, Eleanor carefully gathered the folder and Leo's poignant journal. She knew with a certainty that resonated deep within her soul what she needed to do. She had to complete Leo's plan for Shadow, to give the bobcat kitten the wild, independent life his devoted friend had so desperately envisioned for him. And in doing so, perhaps she could also find a measure of closure for her own unexpected grief and the profound connection she had forged with this remarkable creature. Over the next 3 weeks, Eleanor immersed herself in the intricacies of Leo's release plan, her every spare moment dedicated to understanding his methods and intentions. She diligently reached out to the wildlife rehabilitation specialists Leo had contacted, her voice filled with a quiet urgency as she explained the extraordinary circumstances. She also consulted with several veterinarians who specialized in wild felines, seeking their expert advice and guidance. To her surprise, everyone she spoke with expressed a mixture of astonishment at the unusual situation and profound admiration for Leo's careful and ethical approach to preparing Shadow for his eventual return to the wild. Dr. Evelyn Reed, a highly respected wildlife veterinarian with extensive experience rehabilitating bobcats, agreed to personally assess Shadow's readiness for release. Normally, we strongly discourage any significant human-wildlife bonding, she explained during their first meeting in the familiar setting of the hospital parking lot, where Shadow continued his nightly vigil, his amber eyes occasionally flicking towards Eleanor with a glimmer of recognition. But if what you're telling me is accurate, that this bobcat was orphaned naturally and has been meticulously prepared for release by someone who clearly understood the species' needs, we may be able to carefully complete that process. Under Dr. Reed's expert guidance, Eleanor began implementing the final crucial phases of Leo's detailed release plan. Each night, instead of simply placing food and water near Shadow's shelter, Eleanor arrived with a specially designed puzzle feeder that required the intelligent bobcat kitten to work for his meal, mimicking the problem-solving skills he would need to survive in the wild. Additionally, Eleanor started using the distinct training whistle she had found at Leo's cabin, associating its sharp, clear tone with food rewards, and gradually increasing the distance Shadow needed to travel to reach her. The Bobcat kitten proved to be remarkably intelligent and adaptable, quickly catching on to the new routine, his natural instincts sharpening with each successful challenge. "He's actually in remarkable condition," Dr. Reed observed after conducting a remote assessment using a high-powered telephoto lens camera. "Not overly habituated to humans beyond you, good muscle tone shows appropriate wariness. Leo clearly knew exactly what he was doing." So you think he can truly make it in the wild?" Eleanor asked, her voice filled with a mixture of hope and lingering anxiety. "With proper transitional support, yes." Dr. Reed confirmed, her tone reassuring. "We'll need to follow a soft release protocol. This involves moving him to a temporary enclosure at the carefully chosen release site, allowing him ample time to acclimate to the sights, sounds, and smells of his natural habitat while still receiving supplemental food. Then we'll gradually open the enclosure and slowly reduce the food provisions until he is fully independent and self-sufficient." The plan resonated deeply with Eleanor, aligning perfectly with the thoughtful intentions documented in Leo's journal. But as they meticulously fleshed out the logistical details, Eleanor found herself grappling with an unexpected and poignant emotion grief, not just for Leo, a kind soul she had never had the privilege of meeting, but also for the impending loss of Shadow, who had in his silent, steadfast way become an important and comforting presence in her own demanding life. "It's perfectly normal to form attachments," Dr. Reed assured her gently when Eleanor confessed her conflicted feelings. "But you must remember, Eleanor, the greatest act of kindness you can bestow upon Shadow is to help him become what nature intended him to be, a wild and independent bobcat, living on his own terms in his natural environment." Eleanor knew with the unwavering logic of her mind that Dr. Reed was absolutely right. And yet each night as she watched Shadow emerge from his shelter, those luminous amber eyes still occasionally turning hopefully towards the silent hospital doors before focusing on Eleanor and the familiar sound of her whistle, she felt the heavy weight of responsibility and the undeniable pull of their unique connection. The day of Shadow's relocation arrived on a crisp, clear morning in early December, the air sharp and invigorating. Eleanor had taken a rare day off from her demanding hospital duties, and Dr. Reed had meticulously arranged for a specialized transport carrier and a sturdy temporary enclosure to be waiting at the carefully selected release site. The very same area Leo had painstakingly identified in his detailed plans. As they prepared to gently capture Shadow, who had now grown accustomed to approaching Eleanor at the sound of her whistle, Eleanor found herself unexpectedly hesitating, a wave of conflicting emotions washing over her. "Everything all right, Eleanor?" Dr. Reed asked gently, her keen eyes noticing the flicker of uncertainty in Eleanor's expression. Eleanor shook her head, forcing a small, reassuring smile. Yes, it's just... I'd like to make one brief stop before we head to the release site, if that's all right." Dr. Reed checked her watch, her brow furrowing slightly. "As long as we get him safely to the site before noon, we should be fine. Where did you have in mind?" "The cemetery," Eleanor said quietly, her voice barely a whisper. I think Shadow should have a chance to say goodbye." Dr. Reed gave her a long, thoughtful look, her expression a mixture of surprise and understanding. "An unusual request, Eleanor, but under these extraordinary circumstances, I'll allow it, as long as it doesn't unduly stress the animal." An hour later, with Shadow safely and comfortably secured in the specialized transport carrier, they stood before Leo Maxwell's simple snow-dusted grave in the quiet stillness of Pine Ridge Cemetery. Eleanor had learned from Martha that Leo had been laid to rest just 3 short weeks earlier, with only a handful of close friends and neighbors in attendance. Now, with Dr. Reed keeping a respectful distance, Eleanor carefully set the carrier down near the weathered headstone and gently opened a small viewing panel, allowing Shadow to see out without any risk of escape. "Here he is, Leo," Eleanor murmured softly, feeling a touch foolish yet utterly compelled to complete this poignant ritual. "I found your notes, your detailed plans for him. We're taking him to the release site you so carefully chose. He's going to have the wild, independent life you wanted so desperately for him." Shadow's luminous amber eyes slowly took in the unfamiliar surroundings, his sensitive nose twitching diligently, processing the unique sense of the cemetery. For a fleeting moment, he seemed agitated, shifting restlessly within the confines of the carrier. Then, to Eleanor's profound amazement, the bobcat kitten settled his unwavering gaze fixed intently on Leo's headstone, as if in silent recognition. They remained there in the quiet stillness for several long minutes, the pale winter sun catching the delicate frost on the grave markers, turning them into shimmering crystals. Eleanor found herself contemplating the intricate, often unseen connections that bind living beings together. Some expected, some utterly surprising, all profoundly meaningful in their own unique way. "He was my patient, you know." The unexpected voice from behind us startled Eleanor. She turned to see Dr. Ethan Ramirez, the oncologist mentioned in Leo's hospital records, standing a few feet away, holding a small, heartfelt bouquet of winter greens and pine cones. "Dr. Ramirez," Eleanor acknowledged with surprise, a wave of unexpected emotion washing over her. I didn't realize you would be here today. I try to visit my patients who have no immediate family," Dr. Ramirez explained softly, approaching with slow, deliberate steps. His gaze fell upon the transport carrier. Is that Shadow?" Eleanor nodded, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, Leo's bobcat." Dr. Ramirez's eyes widened in gentle wonder. "So it's true. Leo spoke of him often during his treatment. I confess I thought perhaps it was the medication or a comforting fantasy." He knelt down, peering into the carrier at the small, captivating creature with evident tenderness. He said this little one gave him a renewed sense of purpose in his final months. "He did more than that," Eleanor said quietly, recounting the extraordinary story of Shadow's nightly vigil at the hospital, the depth of his unwavering devotion. As she spoke, she could see Dr. Ramirez's professional composure begin to crack, a raw vulnerability flickering across his kind face. "In 15 years of oncology," Dr. Ramirez said, his voice thick with emotion, "I've witnessed countless expressions of love and grief. But this..." He gestured toward Shadow, and then quickly wiped at the corner of his eye. What happens to him now?" Eleanor explained their carefully orchestrated plan to honor Leo's wishes by releasing Shadow back into the wild, detailing the soft release protocol and the chosen location. Dr. Ramirez nodded slowly, a look of profound approval on his face. Then he reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a small, intricately carved wooden figure of a bobcat. Leo gave me this. He made it himself during his treatment. Said it helped keep his hands busy when the pain was bad." He gently placed the small carving on Leo's snow-dusted grave. I think he would be deeply grateful to know that Shadow will finally have his freedom." As they prepared to leave the quiet cemetery, Dr. Ramirez carefully placed his bouquet against the headstone, a silent tribute to a life well lived and a bond that transcended the boundaries of species. Leo was special, he said softly, his voice breaking slightly. He faced death with more grace and acceptance than most. Said he had made his peace because he had lived true to himself and had helped the wild things survive. He paused, his gaze lingering on the grave. I think he would be incredibly proud to witness this moment. A lump formed in Eleanor's throat as they said their quiet goodbyes to Dr. Ramirez and to Leo, carrying Shadow back to the waiting vehicle, where Dr. Reed patiently stood by. I understand now why this mattered so much to you, Eleanor, Dr. Reed said quietly as they drove towards the majestic mountains, the transport carrier nestled securely in the back. This is about more than just wildlife conservation, isn't it? It's about keeping a sacred promise. Yes, Eleanor agreed, her gaze fixed on the snow-dusted peaks in the distance. One man to another, across the seemingly insurmountable boundary of death. And it's about respecting the profound connections we form, no matter how unlikely they may seem. The release site was everything Leo had meticulously described in his detailed notes. A secluded, protected valley, teeming with abundant fresh water, a healthy population of prey species, and ample natural shelter, far removed from the intrusive presence of roads, yet still accessible enough for their carefully planned intervention. Dr. Reed and one of her experienced colleagues had already constructed a spacious temporary enclosure amongst the dense trees, thoughtfully designed to provide Shadow with a safe and comfortable space to gradually acclimate to his natural surroundings while still receiving supplemental nourishment. As they gently transferred the Bobcat kitten to his new temporary home, Eleanor was struck by how alert and intensely interested Shadow seemed. His small nose twitched constantly, eagerly, taking in the myriad scents of his true environment. There was no trace of the patient mournful vigiler from the hospital parking lot. Instead, she saw a wild creature responding to the primal call of his natural habitat. He already looks different, Eleanor observed quietly as they watched Shadow cautiously explore the confines of the enclosure, his movements fluid and graceful. They always do when they're back where they truly belong, Doctor. Reed agreed, her voice filled with professional satisfaction. We'll monitor him closely on a daily basis, gradually reducing human contact over the next 2 weeks. Then we'll open the enclosure, but continue providing supplemental food at decreasing intervals for another month or so. By early spring, he should be fully independent and thriving. Eleanor nodded, a profound sense of satisfaction mingled with a sharp pang of inevitable loss washing over her. Will you let me know when he's ready for the final release? Dr. Reed smiled warmly, her eyes crinkling at the corners. Of course, Eleanor. You've certainly earned that right. Over the following weeks, Eleanor received regular updates and detailed reports accompanied by captivating photos captured by remote wildlife cameras from Dr. Reed's dedicated team. Shadow was adapting remarkably well, exhibiting strong and natural hunting instincts and maintaining an appropriate level of healthy wariness around humans. His winter coat had thickened, providing excellent camouflage against the snow-dusted landscape, and he had already successfully hunted and consumed several small prey items within the safety of the enclosure, a testament to Leo's meticulous preparation. Finally, in late January, as the days began to subtly lengthen, and a hint of spring lingered in the crisp air, Dr. Reed called with exhilarating news. We're ready for the final phase, Eleanor. The enclosure door will be left open tomorrow morning. If you'd like to be present, you should arrive by sunrise. Eleanor didn't hesitate. She arranged another day off from the relentless demands of the hospital and drove to the release site in the pre-dawn darkness, her headlights cutting through the occasional flurry of delicate snowflakes as a light storm brushed through the mountains. Dr. Reed met her at the trailhead, and they hiked in together, their footsteps muffled by the fresh snow, speaking little in the hushed reverence of the winter morning. At the enclosure, 2 other wildlife specialists were making the final preparations, carefully removing any remaining items that might impede Shadow's free movement. The bobcat kitten watched them from a high, sturdy branch, alert, but surprisingly calm, his luminous amber eyes occasionally meeting Eleanor's, as if in silent recognition. "We don't make a big ceremony of it," Dr. Reed explained softly, her voice barely a whisper in the stillness. "We simply open the door and step back. He'll leave when he's ready." They retreated to a camouflaged observation blind about 50 yards away, and one of the specialists carefully slid open the enclosure door before quietly joining them. Then they waited in expectant silence as the eastern sky gradually lightened to a pearly gray. For nearly an hour, Shadow remained on his perch, occasionally stretching languidly or intently grooming his thick fur, but showing no immediate inclination to venture towards the open door. A knot of anxiety tightened in Eleanor's chest. Would the bobcat kitten, despite all their careful preparations, choose to remain within the familiar confines of the enclosure? Then, as the first direct rays of sunlight pierced through the dissipating clouds, casting dappled patterns of light and shadow across the forest floor, Shadow descended gracefully from his high vantage point. He approached the open doorway with cautious deliberation, pausing at the threshold to test the air with flared nostrils, his sensitive senses taking in the symphony of the awakening wilderness. Eleanor held her breath, her heart pounding in her chest. With a fluid, elegant motion that spoke of his wild heritage, Shadow took one tentative step outside the enclosure, then another. The bobcat kitten stopped, turning his head slowly, deliberately surveying his vast new territory with those ancient, intelligent amber eyes. For just a fleeting moment, his gaze seemed to lock directly onto the observation blind, where they watched as if acknowledging their presence, a silent farewell. Then, with a powerful, graceful bound, Shadow melted into the dense forest, his tawny coat quickly disappearing among the shadows of the trees. Tears streamed silently down Eleanor's face as she watched Leo's final legacy, this resilient bobcat kitten, claim his birthright of freedom. "He'll be fine, Eleanor," Dr. Reed assured her gently, her own voice not entirely steady. "We'll continue to monitor him from a distance, but everything indicates he has everything he needs to thrive." As they hiked back to their vehicles, the sun now fully risen on a world transformed by a delicate dusting of fresh snow, Eleanor found herself reflecting on Leo's poignant journal entry. "He deserves his wild life. I desperately hope someone will help him find his way." "Thank you, Evelyn," Eleanor said quietly as they reached the trailhead, her voice thick with emotion. "Not just for your invaluable expertise, but for understanding why this mattered so deeply." Dr. Reed smiled warmly, a profound understanding in her eyes. "Wildlife rehabilitation isn't just about the animals, Eleanor. It's about nurturing and maintaining the delicate balance, the right relationship between humans and the natural world. Respecting boundaries while acknowledging the profound connections that can unexpectedly form." Eleanor nodded, her thoughts drifting to Leo, to Shadow, and to her own unexpected role in their poignant story. "I learned something truly important through all of this," she admitted softly. "In the trauma unit, we're so intensely focused on saving lives that sometimes in the relentless urgency we forget about the quality of those lives, or the profound meaning people find in their final chapters. Leo found meaning in helping Shadow. And you," Dr. Reed observed gently, "you found a different kind of meaning in completing his selfless work. It's a beautiful chain of care, Eleanor." "Yes." Eleanor agreed, a sense of quiet peace settling within her. "Different from the life and death struggles I'm accustomed to, but healing in its own unique way. As she drove back towards Pine Ridge, the familiar weight of constant emergency decision-making, of lives hanging precariously in the balance, seemed temporarily lifted. In its place was a quiet certainty that she had played a vital role in bridging a gap between human compassion and wild freedom, between one life gently ending and another finding its true, untamed path. 3 days later, Eleanor received a single breathtaking photo from Dr. Reed, captured by a remote wildlife camera. Shadow, confident and alert, moved through his new territory with the deliberate purpose of a bobcat who knew exactly where he belonged in the vast, untamed world. Eleanor carefully printed the photo and placed it in a small frame on her desk at the hospital. Whenever the intense pressures of trauma medicine threatened to overwhelm her, she would gaze at that powerful image and remember not just the critical importance of saving a life, but the profound beauty and significance of honoring one, both human and wild, with dignity, respect, and unwavering love. In the vibrant bloom of spring, as wildflowers painted the landscape around Pine Ridge in a riot of color, Eleanor and Dr. Ramirez quietly arranged for a small, unassuming plaque to be added to Leo Maxwell's grave. It bore a simple, heartfelt inscription, "Friend to wild things." It was a quiet tribute to a kind and compassionate man Eleanor had never met yet, whose profound legacy had touched her life in ways she could never have imagined. And somewhere in the protected wilderness beyond Pine Ridge, a young bobcat moved through the dappled sunlight, free and thriving, carrying forward the enduring chain of care that had begun with one man's selfless compassion and continued through another's promise, faithfully kept. A valuable lesson: the most profound connections often transcend the boundaries of species and circumstance. True compassion lies in understanding and respecting the unique needs and inherent nature of every living being. And sometimes the greatest act of love is helping someone or something find its own path to freedom and peace. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this heartwarming story. Please share your comments below. And if you enjoyed this tale of unexpected connection and enduring compassion, please consider subscribing to our channel for more inspiring narratives. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this story?